DeAndre Swift and Saquon Barkley inside the top five. That's well ahead of consensus. What are we doing with Alvin Kamara now that it looks like he's not going to be suspended? Dameon Pierce, the hype of the week. Where do we have him? We're going to talk about all that and more on our top 24 running back rankings. Let's ride. Welcome back in. So let's just go ahead and get right into it. Our RB1 rankings are as follows. I have Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, Austin Eckler, DeAndre Swift, Saquon Barkley, Dalvin Cook, Najee Harris, Leonard Fournette, Joe Mixon, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, and Javonte Williams. Cody, you have Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, Austin Eckler, same as me. Then with Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon, DeAndre Swift, Saquon Barkley, Leonard Fournette, Alvin Kamara, Najee Harris a little bit lower, and then you have Aaron Jones and Javonte Williams. So, Cody, kick us off here. You want to talk about a little bit of Dalvin Cook?
Sure do, man. I just feel like where he's going in drafts this year, I feel like I want to be either like the top 3 or 4 picks, or I want to be like 8. And the guy that I'm targeting is Dalvin Cook. I'm high on this offense in general this year because of the changes that are incoming with the coaching staff and Kevin O'Connell's offense. We're going to see more 3 wide receiver sets, which is going to help spread out the defense, which means lighter boxes and more running room for Dalvin Cook. He ran against a stacked box at the 7th highest rate last year, and that Vikings offensive line was dreadful. I actually didn't realize how bad it was. But last year, according to Football Outsiders, they ranked 24th in adjusted line yards, and they were dead last in stuff rate, which looks at the percentage of runs that are stopped at or behind the line of scrimmage. And they led the league, like depending on how you want to look at it. They had the worst rate at 23%. I know everyone is going to talk about Dalvin Cook injury history, and that's fine, right? Like it's legit. You know, he's missed multiple games every single year of his career. But guess what? Out of the 2 of the last 3 years, the dude was a top 3 running back. And maybe, just maybe, without Mike Zimmer there to tell the offensive coordinator to run Dalvin Cook into the teeth of the defense and the offensive line, maybe he doesn't miss as many games this year. So the other thing to mention with Cook here is we might be looking at some positive touchdown regression for him. He had 13 and 16 rushing touchdowns the last 2 years before the 2021 season, where he only had 6. So could have some positive touchdown regression here, a better offense overall, Mixon potentially seeing some more targets, and I absolutely love Dalvin this year.
I totally agree. I think everything you just said is exactly why I like Dalvin Cook this year. I think he's in a better spot than he was before. And, you know, I'm not really all that concerned. If he misses a couple of games, he misses a couple of games. I mean, the majority of NFL running backs are going to miss games. To be fair, they miss games because the ones that miss the games a lot are oftentimes the ones that get the ball the most. And so, you know, those are the guys we love. And, you know, as long as it doesn't happen during the fantasy playoffs, you know, I'm totally fine with it. Their only concern really is with the shoulder. He's had a reoccurring shoulder injury. Let's keep it moving here. And I'm going to talk about Alvin Kamara. I am happy to finally be able to talk about this man. For Alvin Kamara right now, I currently have him at RB11. He's currently coming off the board at RB9 or 15th overall in terms of ADP. Last year, we saw a pretty big shift for him. I mean, he had 78% of the opportunities, 50 red zone touches, but he averaged 18.5 carries per game last year, but only 5.2 targets over that span. That is the most we've ever seen for him in terms of carries. Last year was the first time in his career he had over 200 carries, and he played in only 13 games last year. He had over 900 rushing yards and 439 receiving yards, but he did still average 18.1 fantasy points per game. He was 13th in routes run. We had a 20% target share. And this offense last year was extremely run-heavy. They were the 3rd most run-heavy team in the league, averaged over 30 carries per game. A lot of the narrative that you see around Alvin Kamara has always been that, oh, well, you know, Jameis doesn't check down. Jameis isn't going to target him in that way. And that was a little debunked a little bit. Yes, short sample size in only 6 games. But last year with Jameis Winston, he averaged 22.6 fantasy points per game in those 6 games. He also averaged 22 carries, 6.1 targets, and 122 total yards and a touchdown per game. Now, in the games without Jameis last year, he averaged 16 fantasy points per game, only 5 targets per game, 17.8 carries, 100 total yards, and a half a touchdown per game. So I think Jameis Winston actually helps him out. I think this offense is going to be a lot better. The only concerns I have is the thing we've always seen with Alvin Kamara has always been because there's been not a lot of competition for him in his way. It's always pretty much kind of been either him and that's it, Or, you know, in years past, we saw Michael Thomas for 3 straight years. Michael Thomas led this team in targets. That was when Drew Brees was there, but he was always second in targets in those teams. But if you look at the other wide receivers there, you're talking about guys like Ted Ginn was the number 2 wide receiver there in that offense. So there just wasn't a lot of target competition. Now you have Michael Thomas, who is back, and all reports that he's healthy. But then you also have guys like Jarvis Landry, who can still play. You have Chris Olave, who I absolutely love as a late round pick. Marquez Callaway, who was their wide receiver 1 last year, is now their wide receiver 4. And so I just think there's so much more target competition. I don't know if he's going to see that same type of that receiving usage. And yes, maybe he gets more carries than he typically does. But if he sees a pretty significant drop off in targets, which he already kind of did last year, like I said, with the 5.2 targets per game, and now with all these weapons now for Jameis, does he look for Alvin Kamara as much in his passing game, and does he go to his other weapons, which could ultimately hurt him? And I don't know if this offense is going to be as explosive as people think that it's going to be either. I think it could go either way on that. And if it does, maybe he sees less touchdowns than if he does. So that's why I'm just a little bit lower the consensus on Alvin Kamara. I think you can go either way with him. I don't mind taking him at a cost. If he's still going in the second round, that's not terrible. This is a guy that with top 5 upside for sure. But I think there's some red flags here with this game as well.
Let's go ahead and roll into the RB2 rankings for 2022. Kevin, at 13, you have Aaron Jones, who we were just talking about, Nick Chubb, James Conner, Cam Akers, Travis Etienne, Antonio Gibson at 18, Damian Pierce at 19, Breece Hall, Elijah Mitchell, David Montgomery, Ezekiel Elliott, and Chase Edmonds at 24. For myself, I have Derrick Henry for the hate, Nick Chubb, Ezekiel Elliott, Cam Akers, Elijah Mitchell, James Conner, Travis Etienne, Chase Edmonds at 20 for me, Miles Sanders, Breece Hall, J.K. Dobbins, and A.J. Dillon. Kev, in this RB2 range, who are some guys that you want to speak upon?
Yeah, I think first is Damian Pierce, and I have him at 19, and I'm perfectly fine with taking him as your RB2 at this point. They cut Marlon Mack today, and right now, he's locked in to be their starting running back. Lovie Smith already announced that he's done everything he needs to do to be the starting running back, and he's been really good this preseason. This goes all the way back to really Senior Bowl, where he crushed Senior Bowl, and then from there, he was drafted in the 4th round, which with this draft, the first running back wasn't taken until the 2nd round, so it's not as big of a deal for me that he was a 4th round pick. But there's just nobody else there. The only other running back now is Rex Burkhead. Like Marlon Mack was kind of a really surprising drop, at least today, from the Texans, because a lot of people were expecting him to be that kind of compliment to Damian Pierce. And so to me, I don't mind it whatsoever. And so I like Damian Pierce. It's hard to find somebody, and I've kind of comped him to is I think he could be really this year's James Robinson. And a lot of people, this is an exciting offense, but neither was that Jaguars offense James Robinson was in, and it's a very similar situation. Damian Pierce, I think, is a better running back, actually, at least a prospect coming out than what James Robinson was. And Damian Pierce is great pass catcher. He was top 10 in yards per route run among all running backs last year in college football. And so there's a lot to like here with him. And really, the only other competition now is Rex Burkhead, who it's fucking Rex Burkhead. Like nobody's worried about Rex Burkhead. And so, Damian Pierce, while yes, he's not on a great offense, but if he develops into a 3-down workhorse, and the only player that's stopping him from doing so is Rex Burkhead, I will buy that all day. And I think he could end up being a guy that could end up being like a top 10 running back this year. Like it's not out of the range of possibilities. Again, we've seen players do it. Like I said, James Robinson was a player that nobody was expecting, came out of nowhere. The Jaguars cut Leonard Fournette. Right. And then he kind of just took over the backfield. It was his backfield. He never relinquished it. I'm buying Damian Pierce. Like I'm not afraid of the hype. And if you can get him in the 5th round, if you drafted earlier and you got him earlier, you're doing really well. So I really like him. And then the other guy I just want to hit on really quickly is Antonio Gibson. Man, it's been a roller coaster ride for Antonio Gibson this offseason. Obviously, on one hand, you hate to absolutely see what happened to Brian Robinson. And so, with that, it is sad to see like the man got shot, got robbed. Nobody wants to see anybody lose their job, or lose their job or whatever they were expecting to be because of it. But now Antonio Gibson, a couple of days have passed. Like it's okay to talk about now. The Antonio Gibson, like you have to bump him back up. Like we moved him down. You kept moving him down. I think I had him down as like a low end RB3. Brian Robinson, they said they hope he's able to play this year. If he's not able to play, this is Antonio Gibson's backfield. He's had double-digit touchdowns each the past 10 years. He's been borderline top 12 each of the past 2 years as well. And so, yes, J.D. McKissick is still there, but this is kind of the situation now. If you remove Brian Robinson, same situation he was in last year. So now I think now people, again, who drafted earlier in the process are happy with what they got from Antonio Gibson. So because now you got him in the seal. Like I think in my home league draft, somebody took him in like the 9th or 10th round before this news came out. So an absolute steal now for Antonio Gibson. Again, hate to see it for Brian Robinson. Hopefully recovers quickly. But Antonio Gibson now is squarely a strong RB.
Man, I'm still getting over the Damian Pierce love fest here. Yeah, my only thing with Gibson is just not knowing what the timetable is for Brian Robinson. Obviously, they left Brian Robinson on the 53-man roster. He can obviously still be moved to NFI or something like that before the season starts, but just with not knowing it, and like if he is able to make like a semi you know quick recovery, I think I'm just not sure that I'd want to pay that price on Antonio Gibson, just in case Brian Robinson does come back a little sooner than we think, because then I think that could potentially just sink Antonio Gibson. So, like you said, just an absolute roller coaster for Antonio Gibson this offseason. The two guys I want to talk about here quickly, if you've been watching along, if you've been in the Discord, I feel like I've been talking about this guy once a day, every day for the past 3-4 weeks. But Chase Edmonds. So you were talking about some of the guys who were released. Kev, Dolphins released Michelle today, along with Jared Dokes and Zaquandre Wright. So this roster is just Edmonds, a 30-year-old, often injured Raheem Mostert, seventh round pick Miles Gaskin, and an UDFA in Savon Ahmed. So I know the reports earlier in the offseason were like, a 50-50, 55-45. I think we could be looking at more of a 60-40 kind of split for Edmonds here. It's clear he's the best pass catching back among this group as well. The one thing that you would worry about is his goal line role. Obviously, we know what James Conner did last year, just snaked all of those touchdowns from Edmonds. Last year, Edmonds had 5 carries inside the 5, turned those into 4 yards and 1 score. So obviously, he's not a prototypical goal line back. But then you look around on this team and the guys I just named. Who's the guy that jumps out to you that you say like, oh yeah, he's the clear guy they're going to put in that role? I don't think they have one. They all have these smaller kind of undersized running backs. So I don't see someone that's 100% taking the opportunities in that goal line work for Edmonds. So I absolutely love him at his ADP, going off as RB34 in the 8th round, according to Fantasy Pros. So I think he absolutely crushes this draft price and gives us back end RB2 production. The other guy I want to talk about is Elijah Mitchell, and this has more to do with what's going on behind him, more so than the Mitchell himself. We've been hearing all offseason about, the 49ers drafted Tyrion Davis-Price so that they could run more of a committee because they're not sure of Elijah Mitchell's health and his ability to stay healthy throughout the duration of a season. But then the reports have been all over the place. Trey Sermon is anywhere from an RB2 to on the roster bubble. Davis-Price hasn't done a ton to stand out. Now it looks like Jeff Wilson is the guy behind Mitchell. All that does to me just make me feel more confident in Mitchell, that he sees somewhat of a similar workload as he did last year. Obviously, the wild card and the thing that has changed is Trey Lance. We all know about his rushing upside. So obviously he's going to take some of those carries away. But this dude almost had 1,000 rushing yards, I think, 11 or 12 games. So he's not going to need the same amount of work he got to produce similar fantasy results for us. RB14 in fantasy points per game last year, averaging less than 2 receptions per game. Only scored 6 touchdowns as well, so it's not like he was getting a lot of that fantasy production from scoring a bunch of touchdowns or anything like that. So
Really quickly, just rapid fire, no long analysis. Who are 2 players outside of your top 24 that you are taking shots on at the back end of your draft?
another guy I've been mentioning a bunch over the past couple of weeks, Nyheim Hines. According to Fantasy Pros, RB44 off the board in the 12th round. This literally goes to the end of last season with Frank Reich and the coaching staff wanting to get him more involved. We have heard nothing to go against that. All we've heard so far is reports just confirming what they've been talking about since February. So, just 2 years ago, he was RB27 in fantasy points per game. Like I said, going at RB44 right now in the 12th round. Absolutely love grabbing Nyheim Hines there. And the other guy I want to mention here, Jamal Williams. And I think he can make for a really sneaky late round RB, especially for zero RB drafters, right? Swift has only played in 13 games in both of his NFL seasons. It's clear Williams is going to have a role. They've talked about this offseason and wanting to kind of manage Swift, keep him healthy. And if we look at last year through the first 7 games, average was the first 7 games of the season Williams was averaging just north of 12 touches per game. So I think he could have some like low level kind of flex value if you need to throw him in your lineup in a pinch. What about you? Here's some late round guys you got.
Yeah, I love actually both those options. For me, I'm still aboard the Isaiah Pacheco trade. The Chiefs did keep Ronald Jones, which is a little bit surprising, but there has been some speculation around here that they're going to actually be looking to trade him, and he could be traded over the next couple of weeks here. And they kept him because of that value that they felt like that they could actually move him for something versus keeping him, which makes a little bit of sense because he is a redundant asset to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And he really has been terrible in preseason. But Isaiah Pacheco is clearly, at the very least, the number 3 running back in this offense, but I think he could end up being the number 2 running back in this offense. And the same thing I've said about him all offseason, I think he's going to play that Darrell Williams role that we saw last year, get goal line opportunities and be utilized on third downs in the pass catching role as well. So a very valuable option here in one of the best offenses of the league. So that's why I still like Isaiah Pacheco. And then the other one is Tyler Algier. I love getting my hands on this guy as well. Somebody I've drafted a lot this offseason. Another guy who has just kind of a clear path to being the starting running back. It may not start right out the gate, but I think very quickly he is going to take over this backfield. Yes, Cordell Patterson is still there. He's going to mix in. He's going to get some opportunities as well. But Tyler Algier, I think, is going to be the guy that they were hoping Mike Davis could be, and could be a guy that really just kind of takes over this entire backfield by the end of the season. So those are 2 guys that I really love drafting. So other than that, be sure to check out all of our content. We are now less than a week away from start of week 1. We're going to be dropping our week 1 rankings here very soon. So, all the people that are drafting this weekend, you can look early next week. All of our week 1 rankings will be out. We'll probably have an early waiver wire add to players that are sitting out there that shouldn't be, that you should be picking up before week 1. And then, from there, we'll be rolling into our weekly lives that we do every week. Wednesday, we go live. Thursday is our DFS live show. Friday or Saturday is our player prop show that is great with Cody and Tom. And then on Sundays, we go live once again for our start sit show to get you ready for Sundays. And then Sunday night, we'll be right back here doing our waiver wire show. So we got a lot of content. Keep it locked in here. If you haven't, hit that like and subscribe button. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye.